Hey, hello everyone. So first of all, thanks a lot for joining this webinar. We'll be just starting in a couple of minutes. The scheduled time is 3 p.m. Indian Standard Time. So I would like to thank all my speakers who are already there, and it's really a privilege to have such a eminent speaker who would be participating in this very important topic today, which is decarbonizing the agri-food supply chain. Neeraj, just give me a shout out in case I'm audible.
Yes, loud and clear.
Excellent, excellent. So great. So this is the time. Let's go for it. So thanks a lot for joining. And this is your host today, Deepak Parekh. I'm CEO of Agri-Watch. Agri-Watch is a boutique market intelligence and consulting organization, which is one of the biggest private sector database on agriculture, where for past 21 years, we have been meticulously collecting data on yield, productivity, demand across every possible district, state, and as a whole nation, India. We work with governments, that is various ministries, public sector organization, private sector players, small traders, close to a million farmers. The idea is to ensure that Indian agriculture sector can leverage the insight and data which Agri-Watch create every year. Today, we will be talking about something which is straight in front of us. As I say, it's writing on the wall. The decarbonizing of agri-food supply chain is very important and unfortunately sometimes neglected area. And that is the reason today we are having this virtual webinar where we have got stakeholders from input side, output side, multilateral agencies, Government of India, tech companies, both from India and abroad, who will be deliberating upon this very important topic. Now, why this topic is so important? If we see that the global average atmospheric carbon dioxide in 2021 was recorded at 414.72 particle per million. Now, this is something which is highest for past 800,000 years. While we say that, how does that matter? It matters for a very simple reason that because of these greenhouse gases, there is energy imbalance leading to increase in temperature of Earth. A 3-degree increase in Earth temperature could lead to 15 to 25 meter height in our sea levels. Now just think about if the sea level goes up by 25 meters, we all be sitting in, let's say that, in an ocean rather than the beautiful land which we are having. So that's a big challenge. It's just not carbon dioxide. While it is very important, there are other gases like methane, nitrous oxide, chlorofluorocarbon 11 and 12, and other 15 minor GSGs, which are emitted to the level which has never been seen in the past. While carbon dioxide is very important for a very simple reason that it is responsible for 2/3 of the energy imbalance. However, in agriculture, other two greenhouse gases, that is methane and nitrous oxide, is also produced in huge quantities. Now, if we just go by the carbon dioxide equivalent, in the last 3 decades of 20th century, we saw 1.6% growth in the total emission of greenhouse gases. In the first decade of 21st century, it reached to as high as 2.9% till 2011, after which it has started growing at a lesser pace of 1.1% year-on-year basis. If we go by number, in 1970s, we were just emitting 24.6 gigatons of carbon equivalent. While today, when we talk in 2019, it was 52.5 gigatons of carbon equivalent. Now, this was when 3 million years back, we had the similar situation. And you know what happened then? The majority of life form of the earth was washed out. So it's very important that we understand that we'll have to curtail our greenhouse gas emission, at the same time also find ways and means where we can put this carbon back to the soil or the ground, which needs it more than anything else. Now, coming to this topic of agriculture and food, if you see that agriculture is both culprit as well as victim of climate change or the carbonization of our environment. Roughly 23% of greenhouse gases is because of agriculture, forestry, and other land use activities. At the same time, the carbon change is impacting up to 8% reduction in yields in different parts of the world. Now, with this as a context, I would like to invite our first guest, Mr. Parmesh Shah. Parmesh, would it be possible for you to start your camera, sir?
Deepak, I get a command that you cannot start your video because the host is stopped it.
Just a second.
Someone has to give me access.
Yes, sir. I'll do that. Yes, now you're visible, sir. Thank you. So let me introduce you, sir. It's real pleasure to have you, at so early time in US, and it's real honor to have you here. And thanks a lot for waking up so early. So Mr. Parmesh Shah, he's a global lead for rural livelihoods and agriculture at the World Bank. He provides leadership to the World Bank's work in rural livelihoods, in agriculture jobs, and supports development of global knowledge and learning in these areas to offer solutions to client and other development partners. He also leads the rural livelihood and the development cluster in South Asia region of the World Bank and is involved in designing and supporting a number of rural poverty reduction and inclusive growth programs in the region. Welcome aboard, sir, again. I would start straight away with my first question, sir. So what, in your view, is on the urgency to decarbonize the agri-food value chains globally in general and in developing world in particular? Floor is yours, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Deepak, and thanks a lot for inviting me. I think we are at a stage of tipping point in the food system. And if you know that the total economic value of agriculture, allied sectors, agribusiness economy exceeds $10 trillion globally, the environmental, health, and other costs already exceed $11 trillion. So agriculture is a net contributor to the economy. If you take a balance sheet which looks at all the costs, then it's a negative kind of a contributor to the global economy at this stage. So at this stage, it cannot deliver a healthy planet, healthy people, and healthy economy in the way it's configured right now. And you know that food production and other things are already at about 1/3 of the total GHG emissions. And livestock represents about 45% of the methane emissions. Fertilizers and plant protection chemicals represent 80% of nitrous oxide emissions. And a lot of commodities which are grown, particularly in Asia and many parts of the world, like rice, in the present way it is being produced, is a significant contributor to emission at this stage. In India, I think there is a diverse picture. Since 2012, horticulture production has exceeded cereal production. So we are in the right direction because the diversification is very important. But we are at a tipping point in terms of soil carbon and water availability. Also, public resources in agriculture are all skewed towards, non-CSA practices, basically, not climate smart practices. So the public expenditure is very much geared. Example, the whole soil fertility is geared towards chemical fertilizers, and we're not looking at options. And only 3% of global finance is devoted to climate finance in agriculture. And so this is a very crisis point right now. If we don't take remedial action and have clear pathways for decarbonizing agriculture, it's going to become more and more difficult if the process becomes irreversible. There is, data which recently showed that even the transportation, the food miles, what it's called, are coming from logistics, almost 5 times more what it was anticipated in terms of emissions is coming from food logistics. So I think it needs a complete overhaul of the food system to be ready for the next stage of transformation. And without that, food will remain as a negative contributor to this whole decarbonization agenda. Thank you, Deepak.
That's great, and actually very pertinent points you have put in across. Like, while we talk about agriculture being one of the largest sector when it comes to economy, like $10 trillion, but the negative impact of agriculture is also unmatched to none other sector. So that's very valid point that actually we are creating more negativity because of this sector than the positivity when it comes to the environmental aspect of this agriculture. Now, my next question would be we would like to understand that World Bank has been doing a lot of activities for at least a decade. I've been following on the same topic. We would like to understand more based on your experiences that what are those initiatives and what are the World Bank doing to fasten or catalyze those activities?
Thanks, Deepak. I think it's a very good question. And I think the way we look at it is now twofold. It is decarbonizing air and recarbonizing landscapes. So it is not decarbonizing is a buzzword, and we don't realize that the soils have lost their carbon and you need to recarbonize landscapes, which is like a lot of work is required on decarbonizing the air and recarbonizing the landscapes. And these are the two tracks we follow in the World Bank. So if I talk about the pathways we have right now, the first pathway, which is gaining more and more prominence, is soil carbon sequestration, regenerative agriculture, nature-based solutions, climate-smart technologies, localized according to ecological conditions, landscape-based approaches, biosolutions, a lot of focus on crop diversification, and then integrated land use, ecosystem services, and in the context of, and then the precision agriculture, which is precision fertilization, irrigation, water management. Because a lot of, if you look at what's happening is that on one side, there is a limited use of inputs. On the other side, there is an excessive use of inputs. And whenever inputs are used, they are not used in a kind of a precision format in which people get what they want as opposed to getting everything else what they don't want as well, creating negative externalities in that. The third area is the food loss and waste area. And I think that is becoming a very big contributor to the emissions. And so food loss and waste, we are now trying to invest in positive kind of technologies and ecosystem to reduce food loss and waste at all levels. The next one is having shorter and localized value chains. We found this in the context of supply chain disruptions, that it really, the current inflationary pressure we see on food inflation is coming because there are very elongated supply chains. So shorter value chains, local products, which are under control of farmers, and reducing the loop where it's become a bigger loop on that. And then a lot of work on renewable energy, including solar and biogas for irrigation, cooling, and processing. And, and two kind of big imperatives, a lot of focus on data, digitization, measurement, and incentives for really this change in strategy, using a combination of public and market-based incentives to there. Bringing, the satellite data, soil sensors to develop good measurement protocols, move away from vanilla fertilizer subsidies to soil fertility incentives, predictable and real-time analytics and advisory development of business models, and investment more and now on data platforms, public, private, hybrid, and then along with that, investment in innovation ecosystem for incubation and acceleration for decarbonization and climate smart technologies. And then also the institutional change, because our ministries of agriculture were designed ages back when this problem was not there. So there is not a climate smart DNA which is not there normally in agriculture projects. So we are investing now annually $3 billion in climate smart investments globally annually, and every project we do has to have minimum 60% climate co-benefits in every project which we do, and we measure that very kind of judiciously while appraising. And if that figure is not 60%, we try to introduce climate adaptation and mitigation kind of mechanisms in those programs. Deepak, would you like me to talk about specific programs, or I'll leave it to you? If you want me to give some examples, I can give.
Yes,
that.
I think Parmesh, it would be very pertinent if you can share with example, because that would give some of the stakeholders you talked about would be again on this webinar to understand what can be done. Please.
So if you take closer to India, we have made an about 460 million investment in Maharashtra climate smart program, in which through data we have identified the most climate variable influenced and vulnerable geographies. It's about, I think, working in around 6,000 villages. And what is being done is to invest in an kind of what I would call is a large-scale proof of concept on how ministries of agriculture works with other stakeholders and develop a climate smart, planning and investment and innovation strategy. So it is also financing Climate Innovation Center. Is one of the few places where we have made now globally we are investing in 49 locations on climate innovation centers, because climate is something which is not that like you develop a policy now and then you forget about it. You have to continuously innovate and bring in innovators there. So there is an AgTech innovation facility also being launched there. The innovation fund for startups. There's a fund for FPOs to develop these decarbonization strategies, and then on value chains also commodity specific investments. And we hope that if we are able to show proof of concept of how you could do climate adaptation mitigation and what issues we are talking about in some geographies, we probably will get more knowledge and learning from those places, and you will have a set of farmers who will become like climate champions. You have FPOs who will become climate champions in that process. And then we will have a kind of investment strategy which goes to other states also. So similar things we have invested in Karnataka on the watershed programs, which use very, very good spatial data and try to sort of analyze weather, moisture, soil carbon, and then make investments accordingly. We just are also initiating a program for results and recasting the whole national watershed program to become more kind of, which is more carbon smart. Basically, the whole program looks at the measurements and adaptation and mitigation and really promotes those technologies and gives incentives to states which initiate strategies for decarbonizing agriculture. There's a lot of focus on data, technology, and spatial approaches in these programs. Our investments in India on National Rural Livelihood Mission and lots of these programs which are running in Bihar, MP, Orissa, and almost all parts of India have also made significant investments in sustainable agriculture and also on this natural farming and lots of other climate smart technologies. We did a pilot with Global Environment Facilities about 5-6 years back and tried many interesting things and innovations with startups including crop in and others at that stage, and learned lessons from that. And then we are trying to expand through our current investment of about $500 million in National Rural Livelihood Mission, which primarily works with women farmers and also smallholders there. Then Africa is a very important part, because Africa is still not gone through the climate variability to the extent, but the crisis is very acute. So Kenya, Rwanda, and many other programs, and we are now designing large-scale, what I would call, they call them climate resilience food system projects, which not just make investments, but also work at the policy level, also work at the technology level, and also work on the ecosystem level. Because it's not enough to just invest in technologies, you have to invest in the whole ecosystem there. Large countries like Turkey, Argentina, Brazil are now investing in climate smart and intelligent food system projects, that's they call them now. So agriculture ministries are now developing food system strategies which are climate smart and making investments in data, use of digital technologies, because if you don't measure, you can't change climate change. If you don't know what the incentives are, you will continue to adopt the old technologies and old policies, and you don't see the difference. There are almost, like I would say, 39 projects which are making similar kinds of investments with very strong focus on climate adaptation and mitigation. I think in future, we're going to make more investments in platforms and ecosystems, as opposed to making granular investments, because we realize that if you just make investment in a geography X and Y, and you don't invest in the whole ecosystem and platform, those gains which you make in a location evaporate after some time. And you just need the ministries of agriculture to really build capacities to deal with climate on an ongoing basis. People, specialized people who will deal with these kinds of things on an ongoing basis. And they will not do it internally. They will do it in collaboration with some of the people who are in the panel today and all kinds of stakeholders who I think are doing seminal research as well as applications and using data and technologies in a very creative way to transform those food systems. So I'll stop there. And I think I've spoken more than I should have spoken. Thank you.
No, Pamesh, it is really absolutely I'll say that rings to my ear, because we at Agri-Watch, we work very closely on the commodity side. One of our, I'll say, associate organization, ISAP, work at the grassroots level with the FPOs. Then there is an organization called Indigram Lab Foundation, which I sit on board as well, which is part of our overall ecosystem. We work very closely with startup there, 120 of them. So I believe this is music to my ears, and it definitely also for the ears of Regi as well as Kunal, because when you talk about platform, and I believe we already have two more people who will be talking about that. Now coming to the last question, Pamesh, to you is that we have talked about the great initiatives. Now while executing that, what were the challenges you came across, and what would be your recommendation to some of the stakeholders who want to seriously work on carbonizing the soil and decarbonizing the environment?
I think the biggest challenge is institutional. I think across stakeholders, people have not realized that they will have to pivot their current strategies to move towards looking at a climate smart and whatever we call, the Prime Minister has declared already net zero economy and all. It's not going to happen, because we have discussed there are going to be pathways which are going to be different. To give you an example, the biggest challenge is this very linear focus on chemical fertilizers. So there are so many options now. If we had a soil fertility incentive policy as opposed to a fertilizer policy, we would have done so many things by now, because there are solutions now. We know about innovators who are, after Ukraine crisis, who are saying that we don't have to produce fertilizers in a big chemical fertilizer and import it all over there, which creates huge amount of climate, costs with that. So basically, that nitricity is now saying we can produce fertilizer from air and water. From every irrigation project can produce, and you can have millions of decentralized nodes of fertilizer production. That's very revolutionary. Now that thinking, which is a very transformational thinking, plus that you need data, you need measurement, that is not ingrained in the institutions which we work with. So the biggest challenge is more, I would call, is institutional and mindset, basically. So we talk with many ministers of agriculture, and they don't have any idea of what their carbon footprint of their agriculture is. Even the basic data about, and everyone keeps on giving more incentives on rice in the same way as we do it now. So we have a major program on decarbonizing rice itself in East Asia, with Vietnam and many other countries, is really looking at how will you produce rice differently, which will lead to a lesser carbon footprint. There is a varietal change, there is a technology change. So you have to produce rice because that's a food security imperative, but you could produce rice differently. So I would say that the challenge is institutional, challenge is really creating this ecosystem of stakeholders who will work together to do it. Because people work in a very, separate kind of way. And this is not a challenge which will be delivered by each individual stakeholder, whether it's private sector or public sector, doing things on their own and hoping that the problem will be taken care of and we will move to a net zero there. So it needs a very high degree of collaboration. And I think catalyzing that collaboration has been the biggest challenge, basically. Creating platforms where people can come together, having strategies and policies, and rewriting your own agriculture policy to rewrite it in a carbon smart way and in a climate smart way. Very big challenge, because we work with governments all over the world. And we are doing the same thing on data and digital. Like we have convinced, like the Kenyan government, to have a chief data officer in the Ministry of Agriculture. We're convincing now 40 other governments to do the same, that don't have the same Ministry of Agriculture which you had ages before. You have to have an absolutely new configuration where to really deal with these challenges. So I think mindset, capacity, and platform ecosystems. I think I would say these three are the main challenges which we are facing.
Awesome, Parmesh. It was really a pleasure talking to you. Very insightful. And because we also work closely with various state and central ministry of ag in India, I can tell you, the winds of change are also blowing here. So thanks a lot for your time. It was a pleasure talking to you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Perfect. So I move to my next speaker. And before that, Tejaswini has put up a question. She says that why India is having low carbon footprint. Ma'am, that's not right. India is also having pretty decent size of carbon footprint in our agriculture. Only thing is that we are not measuring sufficient. So now I move on to my next speaker. And it's always a pleasure to have my brother from a country which I love and I've worked extensively, Indonesia. So we have got Regi Wayu, who is a founder and CEO at Hara. Hara is Indonesia's leading agtech company, acting as a blockchain-based data exchange and platform for the food and agriculture sector. So always when you say platform, it rings music to everybody's ears, because that's where I believe agriculture needs to focus on. So Regi is a serial entrepreneur aiming to deliver a positive impact to society through exponential technology in every work that he does. He has been driving his professional career for 15 years in many different multinational companies. One of his new vertical includes agriculture, where he believes big data technology and blockchain has the potential to solve Southeast Asia's agricultural challenge. And that's why he created this platform called Hara. Welcome aboard, Regi. How are you, sir?
I'm good. Thank you. Good afternoon. Good morning, Pramesh in US.
Yes. So I straight away go to my first question. Again, the very similar question what I asked to Parmesh. What is, in your view, why there is in your view, there is an urgency to decarbonize agri-food value chain globally in general and Indonesia in particular?
Okay, thank you. Before I answer your question, I would like to say thank you for Parmesh for giving a lot of insight, especially when you mentioned about the initiative of having data officer in agriculture ministry. Is like music on my ears. That's what we are needing. moving forward in every countries in the world. So thank you for that. So talking about decarbonization and talking about net zero is high level concept for me, and I'm in the process of studying and learning how to translate those initiative, those goals into real applicable program executable initiative that I'm doing in my social enterprise. Because by the end of the day, all this concept and all this initiative, which is good, I believe, moving forward, this kind of movement need to be embraced and executing, including measuring the impact itself. But the question is more into how we are bringing into the real smallholder farmers in Indonesia. In my area of field, I'm managing around active 3,000, around 35,000 smallholder farmers and around 17,000 hectares that we are working. So the goal that we are having is actually we are a social enterprise that we are try to drive the welfare of these smallholder farmers. Therefore, when we think the last 2 years, how we can keep improving the welfare of the smallholder farmer family is actually is in line with the decarbonization initiative, where we not only selling the corn from the maize plantation or the maize products, but including the whole tree of maize, which can be sell to the off-takers for livestock feeds. So instead of, because the common practice for the smallholder farmers, they once they do harvest, they do burn it, right? Which is going to impact a lot on the environment and carbonization and so on. But now I think almost 80% of the harvesting product that we are having, the tree maize tree itself being sold to the off-takers of the livestock feed, in which it helps a lot of getting the additional income to the smallholder farmers. That's one initiative that we've been doing. The second one is actually we start to do some rotation of the plants and start to move from the fertilizer chemical into the organic. But that's a challenge. That's a challenge that to really driving into that direction, because the soil that has been putting the chemical fertilizer requires sometimes to recover for the organic one, and therefore the gap that we have in terms of timing, in order for us to be able to produce some result, it's requires some other initiative that we are need to do in order for feeding the smallholder farmers on the ground. So that's the second initiative. Then third one, this is the things that we in the last 1 year we work with the carbon project initiative, in which working with the social forestry smallholder farmers, where we help them to educate, engage on the carbon project itself. The biggest challenge that we are facing is actually on educating, because there's so much a corridor or not regulation, but the corridor on how to do the carbon project on the community development, on the forest agriculture forestry. The smallholder farmers cannot see the vision, long-term vision, because if we try to give an incentive for them to join the project, they cannot see it right now. They can see next 2 or 3 years that they, once the carbon credits is available, then they can get the earning and as an additional income. Therefore, the stages that we are developing together with them, we are still learning to how can we set up the program for the short term, medium term, and the long term. So those are the things that I'm trying to my best to translate the idea of decarbonization, the idea of net zero into the agriculture practice that we are doing. Although we are a data platform company, we are we are capturing and measuring the result of the yield that we are producing, as well as now we are in the study of how to measure the what you call the decarbonization of the agriculture field that we are working on. So that's how I can answer your question, Deepak.
Excellent, Reggie. So, Reggie, one more thing, I've been seeing the great work you are doing in Indonesia, where actually, you are trying to monetize the data being provided by the farmer, because that can act in the short term, the valuable investment they need to move towards sustainable agriculture. I would like to understand a little bit more how you are able to do the activity of traceability and then actually, monetizing the data being provided by the farmer, because that could be a good role model or case study for rest of the people to follow in the rest of the world.
Okay, thank you for the question. It's a very good question. So here is the fact. Indonesian smallholder farmers' average land size is around 0.28 hectares or 0.3 hectares, right? Very small. And the income is around $200 per month maximum. And we have around 34 million of smallholder farmers, and they are a family of 3 and 4, basically. And the fact that we are having is actually the country require 150 years to get land certificate across the agriculture sectors in Indonesia. So if we are waiting for government really pushing the certification process, is going to take, not in my lifetime, of course, right? So the initiative that we are building is actually digitizing the identity of the farmers, as well as the land that they are working on, including the land they own, the land they rent, and the land they're working on. So based on those data, including the data, digitizing the data of when they start planting, what the challenge that they're facing, if they're having any harvest problem, including the what you call yield result and fertilizer and all the farm input that they are using, putting all the together and putting as a one identity of the farmers with all those components into the blockchain component that we are building, then it's become what's so-called collateral of the farmers to the banks, to the insurance, to farm inputs, and to some other off-takers, and including the government, to see what's going on the field and giving them an accessibility to those services that they never get before. So we build an ecosystem based on the data itself, and everyone who require the data, they need to subscribe and submit, and giving the facilities for the farmers. So since we have a financial institution, insurance institution, we have a pop and mom shop on the farm input kiosk on the field, we have an agent, we have a farmers, we have an off-taker, we have a kind of like a closed loop ecosystem based on the data that we are providing to make sure that every transaction are seamless, transparent, and traceable. So that's how we build the platform and ecosystem for our data exchange project that we are having.
Excellent, Ricky. So now, Ricky, coming to the last point, you've been the practitioner, 2015 when we first interacted in Indonesia, right, using big data all the way to blockchain. And you have been working with some of the top organizations, including the both public sector as well as private sector. What, according to you, are the challenge where actually digitization and hence the decarbonization can get impacted, and your recommendation for the different stakeholders?
I couldn't agree with Parma's statement. Is all about mindset. It's all about understanding of what is actually the goals and the implication and the impact and the importance of the granularity of the data whenever they do the decision-making process. Because the country like some other country in the Southeast Asia, including Indonesia, every department, including agriculture, trade ministry, statistical bureau, and some other department within the ministry, they have different data sets altogether. So there's no synchronization across the department in the government. So which data that we are needed to follow and need to look at before we make a decision in terms of policy, in terms of program and strategy that they are going to deploy to the ground, right? So that's why That's why the challenge is the mindset. Second is understanding and the importance of the data itself. That's why I'm so happy when I heard Parmes mention about data officer in agriculture ministry. I couldn't agree more on that. So that's the biggest challenge that we are facing right now.
Sorry, I was on mute. So, Regi, so now just coming to the last question, right? How do you see the learning what you have been able to achieve in Indonesia, right, can be passed on to rest of the world? Like, what platform do you see, like, collaboration? Because we are having a lot of people from, so far we've got people from 18 different countries who are participating in this webinar. I would like to know that, like, how the collaboration can work.
Well, I mean, I think the belief that I have is one is how we can leverage the data for the welfare of the farmers. Because when I started this journey, Deepak, together with you back in 15, everyone talking about data is the new oil, and how to really execute the data is the new oil into real monetization and the real program and the real impact in terms of the society. So I think whoever believes the data is important, whoever believes that data can deliver the social impact, regardless the technology, whether it's big data, whether it's a blockchain, including the remote sensing and everything, but we need to believe on the data itself. Then we are open for collaboration, starting from collecting and delivering impact for the data. Then at the same time, we are monetizing on it.
Excellent, Regi. It was a pleasure having you on this session. And thanks a lot for taking the time. In fact, I have my own so that interpretation when we say data is new oil. I've changed it a little bit. I always say data is new soil, because oil generally used once. Soil, you can put your own seed and you can have your own harvest based on what you like. So thanks a lot, brother. It's a pleasure having you on this call.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
Yes. So now we move on to our next guest, and we are having Kunal. So Kunal is CEO and co-founder of Cropin, one of the company which is, I'll say that, a pioneer from India who's being very successful globally when it comes to EdTech. So Kunal has over 15 years of experience in the technical and management space with substantial work in sales and business development, project management, and product and customer experience management. He's passionate about working on improving farm productivity, climate resilience, sustainability, and food security. He believes that farmers should be data-driven and collaborative, and that is why he's on a mission to digitize 20 million farmers. Welcome aboard, Kunal, and I would straight away shoot the first question to you. And again, the same question. What, in your view, why there is urgency for decarbonizing the agri-food value chain globally in general, and India in particular? I know, like, you have been going places globally, so have both the context, Indian as well as global context from Kunal.
Yeah, thanks, Deepak. First of all, I think this is the need of the hour, and we are on the right topic here. And I'm glad to have heard Parmesh earlier and Regi as well. And I think that really resonates well with the strategy and the approach that we have to really help the entire ecosystem, to help them to solve the problems of the increasing climate change and the carbon that we are facing right now. So our approach is the same right now. We want to reduce the carbon emissions coming from agriculture, make it much more sustainable, so that what we know is the next 60 harvests is what is available for us, but can we make it to the next 100 or 160 or more than that, right? So for doing that, there are a couple of things that we really have to understand and implement. First of all is decarbonization is a big effort. It requires massive amount of investments, and there are different numbers. We have also heard about trillions of dollars, which is required to bring the carbon back into the soil, and obviously that's the use case. So the access to finance would certainly be the important thing, but it should be also that the return of the finance should not be directly going to the farmers. The cost of the decarbonization should not be loaded only to the farmers, but it should go all across the ecosystem, going up to the end consumers as well. That's the stake that we have. That's the thought that we have, that everyone should participate in helping the carbon reduction in that particular manner. Companies like us, Cropin Technology, is doing all their bits to do that. We do work with millions of farmers. In fact, 7 million farmers in almost 50 plus countries right now. And what we have seen is in the last 3-4 years, we've started one of our carbon programs, and thanks to the World Bank initiative, which Parmeshwar talked about, back in 2017 in a small districts in Bihar, like we started working on carbon resilience program, and slowly we learned that this program actually helps in terms of improving the yield of the farmers by almost 32%, reducing the risk from pests and disease, and also helping the entire farmer in terms of the entire capacity building. And that program gave us the results which then helped us to resonate to many more programs. So I think the challenge that we are seeing every year, every season, the weather and the climate is changing. The farmers will have to behave and act based on that. It has to be not at a macro level, but it has to go to the hyper local level of precision. The advisories that we send to the farmers have to be communicated in such a way that the farmers can adopt that, and then we help them in terms of sustainably delivering as much value from the acre of land that they have. So it's a big problem to talk about, but I think there are several steps from production to supply chain efficiencies to better planning to right crop production practice management and things like that, which is actually helping the ecosystems.
Excellent, Kunal. So now again, delving a little bit deep in exactly what you said about, for example, you mentioned a project in Bihar. Can you just walk us through one of such initiative which you have done from start to end, how you've been able to achieve it, what you did, so that, and what was the impact, so that it would have some clear understanding for the audience?
So yeah, absolutely. So when we talk about decarbonizing, right, it starts off with the planning of the crop. And we have heard about the paddy crop system, right? If the farmers goes for paddy crops and they normally use the flood irrigation, whatever is available from the natural fed sources, it actually emits a lot of carbon. And most of our programs are in terms of how can we really move the farmers from the traditional agriculture into high value agriculture. And when the farmers are moving into high value agriculture, because it's a new crop, we'll have to de-risk that portfolio for them. So in our program that we did with the World Bank, for example, the Jivika project, it was called SLAC, Sustainable Livelihood and Adaptation to Climate Change. And this was one of the state rural livelihood mission programs, a flagship program of the NRLM, where we actually implemented the climate smart practice over 4,000 farmers in Bihar and 4,000 farmers also in MP. This was all implemented through 200-member village-based entrepreneurs. These are all women representatives from the village, which are trained to become rural entrepreneurs and village-based advisors. They work in turn with 20-30 farmers in the village to promote sustainable practices and climate smart practice. So as a part of a program, when we realized that this is the overall scope, we started training the community cadres first of all, because we wanted to bring the digital intervention. We have to understand where the farms are, what crops they were growing, and what were the practices followed. So the first part of the process was in terms of understanding where we are, the landscape. So we digitized all of these 4,000 farmers by training our community cadres and understood that what are the current practices which is followed. Similarly, once we understood that these are the practices followed, we started slowly tweaking by bringing the local knowledge of the agriculture universities or what could be the right methodologies that could be brought into that particular production cycle. And there is very scientific methods switching over different crops, from the Kharif crop that you are growing, what should be the Rabi crop and what should be the summer crop, and then again. So if you have a certain knowledge given to the farmer, it not just rejuvenates the soil, but also helps the productivity to improve and less risk coming from external sources. And that is something that we started implementing. So we configured almost 77 different crop programs onto the application. And then every program was attuned to the needs of that particular farmer or the village that we are operating. So we started giving them agriculture advisories from time of sowing. That's very important. When we talk about climate smart agriculture, and these are rain-fed farmers, the biggest problem right now is when should we sow? Because we do not know if the first sowing is happening and there is no further rain that is coming, the moisture reduces and the germination loss is there, which means the farmer doesn't have any more capital to go for the resowing for the same year, right? So we build a program using machine learning to identify each and every single farmer's plot, understanding the 15-day weather condition at the particular plot and looking at the condition and the forecasting and the humidity that is available. We started giving them advices to do the right sowing planning. We then moved, as we started moving further in the program, we started giving them pest and disease advisories because we also knew the condition of the plot. We knew the crop that the farmer was growing and the weather conditions again. So again, using different models of machine learning, we could identify the pest and disease condition, and we started giving them early warning advisories that this is potential problem that might come to your farm. And similarly, at the time when we in terms of irrigation management, in terms of fertilizer and pesticide management, and also in terms of harvest management, for a very simple case, there was a heavy wind that we actually forecasted, and we started giving advices to the farmer that no, this is something that you should do early harvesting, because the wind can actually drop the crop, and you can actually face losses. Some of the farmers believed that's normally how it happens, so they started early harvesting, and they could actually bring the crop in their house, but remainings could not do that. And we found that almost 18% of the crops that were remaining in the fields were damaged. So we see that on climate smart agriculture, from the crop planning to the implementation of the right package of practices, to reducing the risk, to helping them to connect to the markets, this entirely helps the communities. And the digital technology becomes very important because it's all about data. And it's not just only about data, it's also about getting the insights out of the data and translating that insights in a very simple manner to the farmer, that this is something that you do right now, no science behind it. And the farmer starts adopting that. The second thing that we also learned is that it's a gradual journey. If I'm running my company and someone comes and someone else, sorry. So if I'm running my company and someone comes and says, hey, this is the next way, this is the best way for you to run your company, I would not trust that, right? Same is the case for the farmer. He has been doing agriculture for several decades, and we can't change the practice in the very first moment. So it's also important to understand that the translation of that advisory into adaptation of the farmer may take little time. And in this particular program, it was like 3 years. And we realized that from 40% in year 1, we actually reached to 92% in year 3, and all the farmers started benefiting from that. And with that program, I think the Bihar government is really taking a bigger shape. And I think now the programs are being built to take it to the statewide scale. So yeah, these are some interesting things, and very pleased to see the outputs of how technology really helps in terms of delivering value.
In fact, mesmerizing, Dhara Prabha, that's the perfect Hindi word. That shows the 10 years of effort you have put on the field, Kunal, very, very insightful. And thank you for that. Coming to another question, you have been interacting with a lot of governments across the world, and in fact, different stakeholders, even in private sector. What are the challenges you see, in people adopting the decarbonizing of agriculture and food supply chain, and any recommendations from your side for them?
I think primarily it's the change management. So we are part of a coalition that is formed in Europe. It's called the Carbon Plus Farming Coalition. It's built. The World Economic Forum is one of the participants there, and there were 12 other organizations, large agriculture businesses. And we started doing surveys with the farmers in all different countries in Europe, because the overall objective of this coalition is to make agriculture carbon neutral by 2030, and the European Commission is planning to put in investments over there. And we realized that the biggest problem, 70% of the farmers had the challenge of they did not understand what it takes to do that, and who's going to support them during this particular process. The important thing for them is that there is a cost of transition, and who's going to bear that cost. And 70% of the farmers did mention that the cost of transition is going to be loaded to the farmer over a 3 to 4 year period. And if someone can take care of that particular cost element, they can certainly get to the carbon towards the carbon program. And I think when we are building program, we should certainly see that there is a certain intervention which can support the farmer. For example, the carbon, we have the carbon programs right now. If you're doing something positive, in terms of carbon programs, you can actually get carbon credits. Can we also bring in other incentives, from access to green finance to access to services from the government to carbon financing? This can really help in terms of supporting the farmers, and I think that's when the change will happen. Deepak, I'm not sure if I am out or.
Kunal, you're okay. Deepak is out.
Yeah, I'm back. I'm so sorry, some internet issue. Kunal, I'm so sorry. Please continue.
No problem. I think I finished that with a note that I think it requires the complete ecosystem around the farmer to really come together, support the farmer in this initial period. And I think once the farmer starts seeing the benefit, we're talking about natural farming in India and different parts of the world as well. We're talking about the movement from certain old traditional farming practices, moving from traditional irrigation to drip irrigation, using AI and sciences for disease early warning system, smarter production management and forecasting system. So I think getting all these things together, finding the right solution for that particular value chain that we are targeting is the right approach.
Perfect. That was awesome, Kunal. It was a pleasure always hearing the insightful thoughts from you. And thanks a lot for participating and joining this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Deepak.
So now we go to our next speaker, and we are having Mr. Raju Kapoor, who is Director Corporate Affairs, FMC Corporation. So Mr. Raju believes in making things happen in all is all that matters. So that's his mantra. He has proven leadership experience across businesses and functions, building, managing businesses, reputation, and brand equity. He's passionate about government and public affairs, policy, environment, and strategy. Have led profits, revenue operations, strategy, agribusiness, rural markets, turnaround management, and new business initiatives, managing government policies, public relations, innovation management, operations management, and supply chain. So thanks a lot, Raju, for being here. It's always an honor to have you on my show, sir.
Thank you.
So I'll straight away go to the first question. What, in your view, why is there urgency to decarbonize the agri-food value chains globally in general and India in particular?
I think Parmesh set it up very well, and then you have had two subsequent presentations which have put it very loud and clear that we as a humanity face a serious challenge. Next 30 years, our population is going to be something like 10 billion. Per capita food requirement is going to go up by 8 to 12%. Now, we definitely need more food, and within the more food, I think the need for protein, more protein that we need. So that's becoming one issue, which is where I think if you look at the way global warming is taking place, it's kind of threatening the entire system, including the system of agriculture. And in the whole journey, if we look at it, see the emissions are the global warming. Essentially, when we look at that 1.5 degrees C, one of the key pointers, which Parmesh also mentioned, is by way of emissions coming out of agriculture. But if we look at the larger emissions, agriculture is contributing to something like 45% of the methane, apart from carbon dioxide. And we all know that methane is 84 times more lethal compared to carbon dioxide. Similarly, nitrous oxide, 80% of the global nitrous oxide emissions come out of agriculture. Now, these things and this methane, essentially, 80% of the ag methane is coming out of, one is the livestock production, and the second one is the rice production, the way we produce rice, and third one is basically the way we are handling the agriculture residues, etc. Similarly, nitrous oxide essentially coming out of both synthetic fertilizers as well as the manures, the way these are being handled. Now, this being so, I think the entire food and the agricultural system is under a serious threat. But having said that, it's not easy to transform agriculture as it is, because every 1 out of 4 citizens of this world are farmers. So a large number of farmers, almost 2 billion farmers, a third of the population here. 75% of them are smallholder farmers. Now, the challenge with the smallholder farmers, we know very well that every time we have a new technology, taking to them, it becomes a big challenge. So the other issue that we are facing right now is so with this background, what is critically coming out clearly is that we need to transform, we need to change the way we grow our crops. We need to change the way we eat, what we eat. We need to address the waste that we have in the entire food chain, right from production till consumption area. How we manage our forests and nature, that also counts a lot. Now, this being so, this is easier said than done. But then agriculture, the real challenge in agriculture, again, as we see, is 20% of the global emissions again come out of agriculture, 7% out of forestry and land use. So with this background, I think as a responsible agricultural company, it's very critical for people like FMC to be a part of the solution rather than to be a part of the problem. We very clearly see that this being the case, there'll be a serious challenge to the health, the nutrition, and the sustainability of the entire race, if not agriculture itself. So I think this is where it comes. And the challenge that we see when we talk of agriculture clearly is that one is there are large number of farmers, they are less consolidated, there are almost agriculture requires huge amount of people, billions of people to bring about the change, unless like industry where a few can actually trigger the challenge. So large number of people have to be engaged in getting it done. And then the other problem is that agriculture has a different set of objectives also, because you are looking at not only protecting biodiversity on one side, you are looking at climate goals, you are looking at nutrition needs, you're looking at food security, you are also looking at livelihood of these small timer farmers. So when you want to transform agriculture, it's a tricky subject. You've got to balance the two together. Now, in this background, I think the role, this is where I think the importance of why we need to decarbonize agriculture is, because unless you decarbonize agriculture, the larger earth is not going to get decarbonized. The warming is going to continue, and it will lead to all consequences which have been eluded very well by everybody. So we at FMC, so let me just introduce FMC to people who possibly do not know about it. We are the fifth or the sixth largest agrochemical company globally. The company has firmly committed itself to sustainability. And we today have set ourselves very stringent targets on our own. One of it clearly is that we are going to be net zero in the GHG emissions by 2035. So this is possibly the earliest, the most challenging that any company would have dared to do in the chemical space. I'm not sure if there's somebody who's doing it before, but that's what we think we need to be aggressively following it. We have also submitted our near-term 2030 targets to the Science-Based Target Initiatives, which is looking at the business ambition for 1.5 degrees C. We have reset our entire long-term environmental goals to drive absolute reduction in the water and the waste. And also, we have signed up to the task force on climate resilient disclosures, financial disclosures of the UN also. Apart from it, we feel that we have significant ways that we can contribute. And I don't know how much time do I have. Am I taking a lot of time, or can I?
No, you can continue.
Okay,
not a problem.
Okay.
Yeah, please.
So what we see is one of the where do we fit in is one of the reasons we feel is that there's a significant loss in agriculture. Something, if you take only India as a country, 15 to 20% of our agriculture produce is wasted due to biotic losses, due to pests. This is a significant loss. Now, when you go to address these losses, you got to make sure that the farmers who have invested everything up front, especially the smallholder farmers, are able to take home the yield, the crop that they think they should have taken home. But what happens is when the pests come up, they lose significant amount of this one. So where do we come in is basically is that we come to partner the farmer in reducing these losses. And how are we trying to do it is by multiple force. One is clearly that we are looking at, we are obviously a new and a big crop protection company. We have chemicals. We have a huge range of chemicals. The difference being that we have dedicated 100% of our R&D expense to sustainability-enabled targets. So that means any innovation that we do will have to be sustainability aligned. Otherwise, we will reject the innovation itself. So that's one thing that we have definitely done. We have also looked at reaching out and developing customized technology. We talked about local production. So we have huge R&D setup, let's say within India as well, where we do customized research on problems the farmers face. So we develop solutions which are accordingly going there. We have solutions which address the residue issues or the food chain pollution issues. There's a significant amount of, we also developed a protocol, what we call as product stewardship protocol, where we very strongly emphasize on safe and judicious application of the agricultural inputs, more so crop protection chemicals, etc. We have now developed a very strong and huge portfolio of biologicals. So we are actually becoming an integrated crop protection company in a way. And in the transition, we are also looking to become an integrated crop solutions company. So that's our journey. And within the journey, I think clearly 3 things we have set for ourselves. One is the protection, innovation, and engagement. So when we talk about protection, we're talking about moving beyond the reduction of our footprints to drive meaningful improvements in the emissions, energy, water, as well as the waste. Similarly, in the innovation, we are thinking way beyond the current landscape of agricultural technologies in a way that we talk about biodiversity protection, natural resources protection, etc. In the engagement, we are clearly looking to go beyond ourselves and saying we are not the only one who can do it. We have to collaborate with others. So we think we'll go beyond the individual differences and interests that we have to collaborate with all the partners, platforms, and communities to kind of deliver these outcomes on the ground level. So on the other hand side, apart from crop protection, we have now set up a big precision ag division. In the precision ag division, we clearly, all of you know about precision ag, but the idea is to minimize the application, make it more precise, make it more targeted so that the side effects are minimized and the application itself is minimized on the ground. We also run multiple projects here. Like, for example, we run a major project around soil health. Soil was talked about. Under a project Ugam, we do a lot of farmer awareness campaign. Last year itself, we done about more than 100,000 farmers have been trained on what we call as good soil practices. How should people handle soil? What should they be doing about the soil? Similarly, on the water front, I think we have done major initiatives in the country right now on water stewardship, because 80% of the fresh water in India is taken away by agriculture. And within that, I think almost 60 to 70% of that is taken away by rice and sugarcane. So how do we have production of these crops in a manner which is least impacting the already deteriorated resource levels? That's the target that we are working on. We are working with the farmers also. Similarly, in states like Punjab, we are working on safe rice campaigns, where we are looking to ask the farmers to use good agricultural practices, etc. So that's where we are right now. We do promote alternate cropping patterns for the farmers. For example, we are encouraging them to take the message right down up to them to say why should they not alternate the crops or use crops in a manner that they become more profitable, yet less imprint on the less hand of footprint on the environment. So this is where the organization is focused, Deepak. So I wonder whether I could answer your question, but
no, perfectly fine. And actually, in fact, this is what we were looking also, the initiative being done on ground. And you very rightly shared, the various practices being supported, and coming from agrochemical companies is always heartening to see that sustainability is seen by all with right lens. Now, this brings me to last question to you, Raju. I would like to understand what would be based on your extensive experience of spanning multiple organizations and multiple roles, where do you see the challenge coming, and what would be your recommendation to the stakeholders who really want to contribute meaningfully to the decarbonizing of agri-food supply chain?
let me get back to Pamesh. I think he put it out very rightly. So being a corporate affairs guy, the first thing is about the institutions. I think we need to have as a country, we need to have an institutional mindset as to what is decarbonization, what are the benefits of this, who's going to bear the cost, and how are you going to transition to that? All of us together. Today there are multiple voices. Government has one voice on the other side saying natural farming kar lo. On the other hand, saying, say, please protect the crops. On the other hand, say, we have enough urea, enough fertilizer. Please don't worry about it. So use it as you like. So I think we need to have a consensus. So I would recommend the challenge, of course, is the disparity. I mean, the disparate thought processes. First within the polity, then multiple agriculture being a state subject between the state and the state. So if we can have a harmonization of the thought process as a country, what will be our strategy? So that's one big challenge I see, because without that, we are not moving forward. And as we have seen, reforms in agriculture are very, very tricky, and they can be very engaging for the powers to be. So one needs to tread very carefully onto it. Bearing the costs of transition would be another big challenge, because already the system is so much loaded, and already, I mean, the way we are facing challenge in the WTO right now on subsidies fronts and all that stuff. The more we try and go in this direction, the more pushback will come from the global communities to, put us online. So this is what we call as the political. This is on the political front. On the regulatory front, I think we need to have regulatory setups right now, which are more in the control mechanism. So they need to move away from control to regulation, say, or rather facilitation. Introduction of newer technologies, I mean, the newer, safer technologies faster. That I would say, would be one ask that I would have possibly, which would facilitate this transition to decarbonizing, whether it be in the area of fertilizers, whether it be in crop protection, or wherever, even in the irrigation for that matter. Allowing newer formulations to come. For example, fertilizer, urea has a use efficiency of about 27% or something. Now, if you had a new formulation, if you had allowed a new formulation quickly, fast, then it could have something like 70% use efficiency. So literally, you would have avoided 70% of the nitrogen flying out either in the sky or on the ground. So we could have avoided that. Similarly, on the biologicals, I mean, we are one of the largest players on the biologicals outside, even in the nutrition front. But can I bring my product to India? I think that's a big challenge. So if we can facilitate that, allowing, I'm not talking about importing it to the country alone. I'm talking about bringing our strains, multiplying them here, and then using them here. Fully aligning with the Make in India. So that's third. The bigger challenge I see is who is going to drive this change? So public and private together can only drive it. We can possibly go step by step, crop by crop, like Parmesh gave an example of Maharashtra. If you could have those learnings brought back, and then if you could follow those learnings, so that would be a good thing to start, in my opinion. You can't start a country as a whole. I mean, we saw Sri Lanka, what happened to them. They wanted to go organic, and today they are neither organic nor inorganic, and I think they are in the big soup. And so is the case of states like Sikkim in India, which wanted to go this way, but they are nowhere again. So like I said, it's a very interesting thing to say we go organic, we go natural, but it's a huge challenge. So we got to phase ourselves, we got to back ourselves up, both from a capability point of view, capacity point of view, regulation point of view, and then from a technology point of view. So once we have those backups, so these are some of the areas where I see challenge. Also in aggregating the farmers. So there are multiple farmers. So the FPO thing, I'm very happy to know about 120 FPO that you AgriWatch group is trying to mentor. But then what are we doing through them? We are actually aggregating the farmers. So if we can incentivize aggregation of farmers for even the private sector companies, that would be a great thing to go, where you give them a target and saying, okay, get them on board, get these FPOs to become viable, let's say in 3 years time from now, and then the objectives from commercial to environmental objectives. So if they can give us those targets, we can adopt those FPOs and try and run them. So this could be another answer, if I may say that. And obviously, one challenge which I feel very strange is we as a country, I always had an impression that we are a vegetarian country. But if you look at the country as a whole, apart from some of the northwest areas, whole of the 93% of the 83% of the population is all 93% of the population is all eating meat. So every time you eat meat, then you got to address the challenge that comes along with it in terms of the emissions that come along with it. So if we can address those aspects, so again, technology comes in. How do we have those technologies that can address the issue of this, or maybe linking residues to rumen, if I may call it? Can we have those kind of technologies which can reduce the emissions, and then only you can go for a meat-based technology? So multiple challenges, but opportunity is great. I think all of us have to work together onto this, and we are very optimistic that we are going to contribute and be a part of the solution.
Excellent, Raju. It was a pleasure always, as usual, to hear from you. And together we have to work. And I believe you are the project leader, right? So you'll drive the way for a lot of people. Thanks a lot for being here, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate it.
So now we go to our next speaker.
Yeah.
So our speaker today is Dr. Badri Narayan Gopalakrishnan. He's head Trade and Commerce and Strategic Economic Dialogue at Niti Aayog. The Niti Aayog serves as an apex public policy think tank of the Government of India and is a nodal agency tasked with catalyzing economic development and fostering cooperative federalism in economic policy making process using a bottom-up approach. Dr. Badri is an applied economist with 20 years of experience and expertise in economic modeling and data science in many areas such as international trade, energy, agriculture, industry, and health. The economic impact of new technology is also one of the subject he is having expertise in. The technologies like drones, robotics, 3D printing, nanotechnology, cloud, IoT, blockchain, and many more. He has formerly led the development of a complex economic database of over 140 countries in the world. We welcome you, Dr. Badri, for this event. So I would like to go ahead with my first question. What is your view on urgency to decarbonize agri-food value chains globally in general and India in particular?
Thank you very much, Deepak. It's a pleasure to be part of this forum. On your first question, globally we are talking about net zero in terms of emissions, and in different points of time in the future. For India, it is a little later. For many developed countries, it is a little earlier. But in any case, there is a need to reduce and minimize carbon emissions in different sectors. And agricultural products and the food processing products are among the highest carbon emitting sectors in the economy. Of course, we also have transportation, we have fossil fuels and so on, but agriculture and food production also has a fair share in it because of not only the CO2 emissions, but also the methane and other kinds of greenhouse gas emissions are produced here. So that is why we have to, given the broad targets of reduction in emissions, there is an urgent need to focus on the decarbonization of the agri-food value chain sectors, because there is a lot that can be done in the sector. And more importantly, I think decarbonization in many sectors costs a lot of money, and also has implications for productivity, efficiency, and so on. Whereas in agriculture and food value chains, it can be a double dividend. Like what we call in economics the Porter's hypothesis. When you do what is good for the environment, what is good for the society, that also coincidentally is going to increase the productivity and efficiency. And that potential exists in a large part of agricultural sector. So it gives us kind of agri-food value chains. They provide some kind of a sweet spot for decarbonization, because overall decarbonization is very costly, but in this sector, it can be like a win-win, because you can actually increase efficiency, you can reduce emissions, and that can contribute to the overall reduction in emissions without incurring a lot of costs and boosting the efficiency productivity, which is much needed. And given the current, and you talk about urgency, given the current crisis that we're going through, the food crisis and inflation and so on, efficiency increase is very important, and that can actually come from decarbonization. That's what I think, and that's how I think this urgency is important from the points of view of reducing emissions itself, increasing efficiency, and also working on the prices.
Awesome. So according to you, who are the stakeholders, and do you think they are having seriousness for doing the decarbonization of agri-food value chain?
So the key stakeholders in this process are the farmers, the manufacturers, the food processing industries, and of course the government and also the consumers, actually, because consumers at the end of the day are going to determine their willingness to purchase these products. So now think about a situation where you have this as a kind of for the moment let's think that government is out of the scene. Like this is just a voluntary thing. Government is not imposing any regulation or policy there. So in this context, how do you think this can happen? So first thing is there has to be a market for it. So the consumers have to have some awareness, saying that okay, decarbonization is important. It's not just people always worry about the product standards, like the food that I consume, the vegetables, the fruits, the whatever products that I consume. They are tasty, they are healthy, they don't contain any chemicals. Those are the things the consumers would bother about, and not all consumers. A large majority of consumers in a country like India would be price sensitive. They would only look for whatever is cheap, I'll buy, kind of thing. But there will be like a niche market. Some richer consumers, elite consumers who are globally aware and information rich consumers. So those people would also bother about the process standards. Okay, it's not only important as to what I'm consuming, but also how is it produced? How is it going to affect the environment? How is it going to affect my future generations and so on? So those kind of consumers, fortunately, in a country like India, they are increasing in number. There are more and more consumers coming. So I think that part of the stakeholders are increasing, growing, and they really care about decarbonization food, right? That is one part of the stakeholdership. Second important stakeholder is the farmers themselves, because the farmers have to recognize that okay, some consumers are doing this, so let me package it accordingly for them. Let me do this properly and target those consumers. And that is possible, but then that has to. The farmers have to take it very seriously. They have to. It's not just a matter of like getting a certification and getting like many times what happens in developing countries is that you get a certification, you do all the things needed for convincing the certifying body or the regulatory authority that you are doing all the right things. But then later on, when you produce in a mass way, you don't follow all those things that you committed for the certification, right? So, for example, you may be certified organic, but when you test all your consignments, your specific products that you're making, you may not have, they may not be organic, right? So that happens even in developed countries, such things happen. So that is the second challenge. Like the farmers, some of the farmers may be serious, but not all of them, because they are worried about profits. And many times, either because of lack of awareness or lack of best practices, they may be more expensive. The production of decarbonized kind of methods, using decarbonized methods, may be more expensive for them, and because of that, they may want to evade that. So that tendency may be there. And same thing with the food processing industries. They also are not, at the end of the day, they are interested in making profits. And if they're not convinced that profit making is possible while decarbonizing, they won't be serious about it. So then comes the government as a stakeholder. And obviously, the government has given enough signals and given enough statements, including the Honorable Prime Minister and other ministers, that we are going in the path of decarbonization, and we are coming up with policies and procedures for that. So, and those are important. Once they come into place for sector-specific aspects, then then it's going to be like a mandate. It's no more a nice thing that, okay, some consumers like it, some consumers don't like it, so let's focus on that. So it's no more that kind of a game. It's going to be like a universal game. So that's where the government steps in, and government is serious in this, and a lot of efforts have been taken in this regard. But a lot more has to be done, and policies and procedures have to be set for this. Most importantly, the producers have to be convinced that decarbonization can be done while increasing efficiency, as I told for the first point. If that is done, and that processes and methods are clearly specified, defined, then everyone will be interested. Like, for example, the initiative taken by my colleagues in Niti Aayog about natural farming. That is one example as to how yield can be increased, productivity can be increased without using chemicals and so on. So that can be one way of thinking about. A lot more research and development has to be happening in this area.
Excellent, Dr. Badri. In fact, you have answered my two questions, right? One was about the stakeholders, also very important, the challenges associated with them. And you very correctly mentioned about the government's initiative. And one of the initiatives you mentioned about was the natural farming, which definitely would be helping in decarbonizing agriculture and food sector. Any other initiative globally would you like to think about which has excited you and you think could be replicated or should be scaled up?
Yeah, I think I cannot think of specific initiatives globally, but broadly, there are different organizations and institutions that are working on it, like this IDH is a Sustainable Trade Initiative, which we have also been discussing at Niti Aayog on various topics. That initiative is more like, okay, you don't have to only focus on your domestic market, because at the end of the day, what happens is if you regulate the domestic market a lot, then and if the methods and the processes are not feasible for the domestic market, then it is likely that the domestic market can plunge, the domestic market can disappear, and then imports can happen, and that is undesirable, because if the imports are not following all these regulations, then basically it's a matter of leakage. It's a double disadvantage for us. One is we are losing our domestic market and domestic job creation, and two, our fundamental intention of reducing emissions is gone, because we are importing it from somewhere else who are anyway creating those emissions. So this issue has been addressed by IDH, the Sustainable Trade Initiative, and we have been exploring some collaborations with them. wherein we can have standards defined for the imports and for the domestic. Whenever we do any such initiative, this natural farming or any such initiative on a mandatory basis, on a mandating basis, then we have to also impose that on the imports, and that will be WTO compliant. So we shouldn't think of India as an isolated country which is interested in doing these things domestically. Instead of doing that, we should be a global leader. That okay, we are doing this decarbonization. We want all the imports to follow our stuff, and that what would that do is to also give space for the domestic sector to grow, while making sure that the imports are compliant with these requirements. So that's one initiative where it brings trade into the picture. It's not only the domestic market but also the trade. And I think another set of initiatives taken by the government of India is a slew of ideas and measures like this, the using neem for urea that was done. It was actually an initiative started by our Honorable Prime Minister himself, and then water, water conservation using less water, and then introducing new technologies like drones, for example, for targeted irrigation. Drip irrigation is now obsolete. Like targeted irrigation is much better. Similarly, targeted application of fertilizers and so on, rather than just putting them across the board. And also we have to in the future we also have to think about fertilizer use and the corresponding subsidies there, which is a very sensitive topic, but we have to think about that, and we have been thinking about that as to how to incentivize the farmers to use fertilizers judicially, and also move towards natural fertilizers and so on. So these are all some other initiatives that are being taken in Government of India, apart from the trade initiative that I said outside India, which is something we might also think about in the future.
Excellent, and really appreciate the great work the Government of India is doing, and very important areas of, for example, when you talked about reducing the usage of fertilizer, I believe that's very important, and using latest technology or promoting usage of latest technology is something which we all believe would help, not just India, but the world around. Now, this brings me to the last question of this interesting discussion, and this I would like a one-line answer from you, that based on your experiences across the world, what role do you think the government should be having in facilitating or empowering the decarbonization of agri-food sector?
So I think the government should play the part of standards developer. So we have to set the stage for standards, rules, policies, procedures, so that it becomes easy for the farmers and the producers to follow them and the consumers to understand them. So I think that should be the limited role of the government. You cannot expect the government to push everyone to do things and subsidize for everything and so on. But we should stay as a standard setter, rules and policy developer, basically. So that should be our limited role, I feel. Right,
limited but very important. Thanks, yeah. Dr. Badri, for a very interesting conversation. I always love talking to you, and I know you are in US and it was difficult for you to join, but still you made it. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Deepak. Thank you.
So our next speaker is Janet Astrakar. She's head of product at SIBO. SIBO is a breakthrough technology platform that accelerates regenerative agriculture and is the first direct from the farmer carbon marketplace. Janet is an entrepreneurial scientist and agriculture technology innovator experienced in translating and delivering novel IP into real-world solutions. She spent more than 10 years as an academic soil scientist, modeler, and entrepreneur developing and commercializing algorithms that predict soil properties, water dynamics, and productivity from subfield to continental scales. Her technology has been used to deliver critical soil information to at-risk agriculture communities throughout Central and South America, as well as to help US and Canadian farmers improve precision management through high-resolution soil maps. So welcome, Janet. And I would straight away shoot the first question. What is your view on the urgency to decarbonize agri-food value chain globally?
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me here today. It's a great question. There certainly is a very big sense of urgency to decarbonize the agri-food chain. And it's important, right? We have an enormous amount of emissions coming out of our agricultural systems. We know that these emissions are causing impacts globally with climate change. We know we have to decrease emissions, and we know we also have to mitigate emissions by sequestering carbon from the atmosphere, and that there's quite a bit of potential within our agricultural systems to do that. So there's a great need and potential in agriculture to reduce our emissions and actually mitigate climate change through the sequestration of atmospheric carbon in our agri-food supply chain, which is, broadly what we think of as decarbonization. So it's very exciting. I think on top of just this desire to reduce emissions or sequester carbon, the practices that lead to decarbonization, such as cover cropping, reduced tillage, keeping the soil covered, keeping the carbon in the soil, these things are really important outside of just decarbonization or reduction of emissions. It's important to increase carbon in the soil, not just to mitigate climate change, but to actually enable our food systems to weather and endure climate change itself. So increasing carbon in the soil actually enables the soil to hold on to water in a drought and release soil in a flood. And these are circumstances that are occurring more and more and more due to climate change. So it's not just about decarbonizing or reducing emissions, which we have to do if we want to stop or slow down the increase in climate variability. It's also about improving our food systems themselves and growing resiliency.
Super awesome. Now, as you rightly mentioned that our agri-food system need to improve, and seeing what's happening around the world and the interest in ensuring that more and more farmers are adopting regenerative agricultural practices, but there is a cost associated with that. How do you see carbon markets playing a role in decarbonizing the agri-food value chains globally?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so, where I really think carbon markets play an incredibly important role is as a catalyst, right? So financing this transition to agricultural practices that are going to enable us to endure and weather the coming, and current climate crisis, that's expensive. It costs a lot of money to make the transition, and there's a significant amount of risk associated with it as well. And so farmers are going to be very slow to adopt these practices and take that risk on. So I really see carbon markets as an opportunity to get the flywheel spinning, so to speak. We can take that money and use it to finance the transition to a new practice. And then over time, carbon credits run out. So once a grower has been doing these practices for quite a while, like 10 years, they're no longer eligible to generate carbon offsets. But over the course of those 10 years, they have generated, a carbon neutral or perhaps low carbon or climate smart product or commodity. So I also view carbon markets and carbon offsets as a way to transition farmers and kind of the agri-food chain to this kind of future where we will be producing more climate smart commodities, or we'll be paying a premium for crops that are grown with a lower amount of inputs or a lower carbon intensity.
That's great. Yeah, please.
Yeah, no, thanks. And I would add as well that, they are completely evolving the carbon markets almost on a daily basis, it seems like. And so today, when we talk about carbon, we're talking about offsets, or going out and removing carbon from the atmosphere, or reducing emissions into the atmosphere in outside of one's own supply chain. So what we're seeing moving forward is a deeper interest in insets, or reducing emissions and drawing down carbon within one supply chain. And so we're already seeing a transition from this concept of offsetting to insetting, and then later starting to think about things like premium pricing for low carbon grain. So as these things evolve, what's really important is that farmers are able to take advantage of the changing and evolving financial mechanisms, such as carbon offset markets, inset markets, premium grain markets, again, that enable them to finance the transition to better practices.
That's great. The dimension you brought about, like, creating those products which are climate smart product, and those value going in hands of consumers, and they're appreciating it, and they incentivizing it rather than just only depending on the market. It's a great idea. Now, as you know better than anyone else, the sector you are working in, which is very nascent, right? When we talk about awareness, and then on top of it, talking about all these difficult technology terms, whether it is on the digital side or even the agronomic side, right? How difficult, or what are the challenges people faced when you were trying to roll out SIBO with different stakeholders?
Yeah, that is a phenomenal question. And the stakeholder component is really important because the challenges are different depending on who you're working with. So kind of starting at the grower level, it is very difficult to get at what they're doing. A lot of the time their decision, to adopt a new management practice has nothing to do with technology, or it has nothing to do with a carbon incentive. It can be emotional decision. It could be based on their historical practice. It could be based on, what the price of, wheat is this year. There's a lot of decisions that go on there. So really one of the biggest challenges is getting the farmer to make the change. And at SIBO, we can use technology to help that. We can use
I'm so sorry again, there was some disruption because of net. Let me just go to the next speaker, just a second.
There is a net zero here also, right?
So now we go to our next speaker, Mr. Dushin Thiagi. He's CEO of FarmGate Technologies India. He is an agribusiness leader with close to 3 decades of experience serving across the agri value chain. He's credited with spearheading the implementation of ENAM, which is Electronic National Agriculture Market, a transformative project evangelized by none other than the Prime Minister's office. He was a strategic partner for the project. Today, ENAM is the world's largest spot agri-commodity trading platform, having a $25 billion plus turnover. He is also co-chairman of Astrakar, which is a very influential business as well as corporate association based out of India. He is heading its National Council on Agri Input and Farm Practices. Thanks a lot, Mr. Dushin, for participating in this event, sir.
Thank you, Deepak. Very happy to be here, and thanks again for the invitation. This is a topic where I feel all of us really not only need to start thinking, but rather than we should start implementing. We should bring our focus here. All our business models, future developments, and whatever we want to do here, we really need to keep this constant now in our site, on our site. So I'm very, very happy to be at this session. And thank you very much to AgriWatch also. And we are getting very nice, very informative and data supported information, and so few of most of your posts are very very complete. Very happy, and I wait for your next post every time. So a lot of research I can see there.
Thanks a lot, sir. Humbled with your kind words. So, sir, coming to the first question, what is your view on the urgency to decarbonize agri-food value chains globally in general and India in particular?
See, Deepak, like, they say we have seen, if you go back about 10 years, people were started talking about climate change, about, increasing global warming, greenhouse emissions, greenhouse gases. So at that time, a general assumption was, all the environment, all the feminists, of 70s, now they are converting into kind of environmentalists now. Because in a country like India, when 10, 15, 20 years back, the challenges, especially in agri-food space, were different. But whatever we used to see, we used to read, we used to be cautioned about, now that is happening in front of our eyes, and it's a wake-up call. So climate change of late is very, very prominent. We can see, warmer temperatures and hotter climates. We see more number of hot days, more number of heat waves, wildfires, even in the most developed economies, even in the where people have very, very advanced ways and means to deal with. We see more severe storms causing flooding everywhere on the globe. So and then we see very, very disturbed pattern of rainfall. First thing, in untimely high distribution, there is a problem, and then intensity, volume of rains is calling basically causing a havoc with life wherever it is, in all forms of life, including human. So we see, for example, Korea, they say it is sinking 6 inch every year. So those are, for example, Bangladesh. There are apprehensions that we may see coastal areas like Mumbai, Bangladesh, and others in future, sinking, and those kind of projections are very, very serious. So loss of species is happening, oceans are rising, and then the direct bearing is there on the food production also. Agriculture is highly climatic dependent, and we have seen this year, for last few years there is a drop in wheat productivity, and mango. Many of the crops we can witness, the impact of high temperature in late winters is now reflecting. So it is related to everywhere. If you look at the impact of greenhouse gases and global warming, now we are feeling. So if you look at agriculture, especially agriculture, generally we see in this context, we hear a lot about industries, that they are polluting more. We hear about advanced and industrialized nations, that they are the major contributor for those greenhouse gases emissions. But if you look at the distribution, what you called AFLU, agriculture, forest, and other land use category. So if total emission composition, if you look at industries contributing about 32%, power and heat is contributing around 18%, and agriculture and other land use, agriculture, forestry, and other land use put together 27%. So it is almost next to industry. So others are 24. So agriculture is not that prominent, but it is big. It is big in this context. If you look at one category of contributor animals, livestock, it is contributing close to 9%, 8% of the GHGs, greenhouse gases emissions, which is almost equivalent to one of the major contributor, US. US is again have 8, index of 8, and one category in agriculture, animal and livestock. Basically that their contribution is also around 8 gigaton of carbon dioxide. So my idea is this, agriculture is important, and it's a major contributor. And from where it is happening in agriculture, two major components. One is methane, and other is nitrous oxide, what you call N2O. So, I mean, in agriculture, if we try to understand from where the major contributions are coming within agriculture, 20% is coming from agriculture and 7% from forest and other land use. So, if we try to understand basically this 27%, the major component is methane and nitrous oxide. Methane, basically, if we look at, again, it is coming from livestock or our dairy cows, enteric fermentation. Basically, they emit a lot of methane, which is almost contributing 41% of the generation out of this category. Then again, manure. So manure management, it contributes around 9%. And the another major, area of concern is rice cultivation, which is almost 10% plus. So all put together, methane is contributing 60-61% of, the agriculture emission part. Other is, energy use, forestry, synthetic fertilizers, burning crop residues, burning savanna. So these are the major areas which comes from agriculture, and they are adding to greenhouse emissions. So if we look into the future a little bit, agriculture is not only large, it will continue to grow. Also, you know it very well. I mean, by 2050, we will be having a 10 billion kind of a population size. So for that, you means, 8 to 10% of per capita food requirement will increase. And if the things remain same, agriculture will witness another 10 to 15% more contribution in addition to this 27 if we don't do something and if we are not addressing it. So if we try to understand the gravity of problem further, these two components, methane and nitrous oxide. So methane contributes almost 45% of the global emission contribution coming out of methane. And nitrous oxide contributes close to 80%, cutting across the industry and all other categories. So 80% of the nitrous oxide is coming from agriculture and 45% of the methane is coming from agriculture. So agriculture have two major components, and these are high impact components. If you look at it, means if you try to understand, their what you call, potential to basically potential, what you call it, basically potential of greenhouse emissions. So methane was found to be 84% stronger than carbon dioxide. And nitrous oxide is 264% stronger than carbon dioxide. Means if you, in short term, you want to have a control, if you work upon agriculture, if you work only on methane, because it's, a lifetime is shorter than carbon dioxide, 12 years. So if you start working on methane, you can have quick results. So we are having a serious problem in our hands. And we have to start work on it, as I said in the beginning of our today's discussion.
Sure, sir. I totally agree with you. And as you rightly mentioned, that time is now, and we have to understand the multiple facet of the carbon emissions. Now, I would like to understand from you what, according to you, should be the strategies Indian agriculture sector need to work upon so that we are able to achieve our basic commitment which we have given in Paris Agreement, sir.
Yeah. So our problem is agriculture. If we look at, like I said, is confined to two major components, methane and nitrous oxide. So we have to deal with it, and the entire policy framework, and it's drilled down till farms really need to be synced into the existing policies or development, work we are doing as a country. First thing is, we have to basically integrate this part into our broad policy framework for the agriculture development in the country. So we have to reduce biomethane from cattle. We have to reduce biomethane from rice cultivation. And second thing important, reduce biomethane and increase resource use efficiencies. So when I say increase resource use efficiencies, so we have to deal with our irrigation water properly. We waste a lot of water, and Indian agriculture uses 80% of the fresh water available in the country. And we have some wonderful, companies and wonderful, research institutes working on. This is the area where India really need to make a substantial dent. There are water management companies, micro irrigation companies, new technologies are coming. So we have to increase irrigation water use efficiency. We are a rain-fed country by and large, and we have a crop composition which basically responds very well to this. Second thing, we have to bring balance in our fertilizer application, because in 1970s, 1 kilogram of fertilizer applied or nutrient applied used to give a crop response of 13 kg of yield output. You apply 1 kg of nutrients, you will get 13 kg worth of grain yield. Today, 1 kg of any nutrient application is giving you 3.2, 3.4 kg. So this is the status we have basically in the quest of producing more, in the quest of meeting out our food requirements, and in the quest of keeping our farmers' incomes intact. We have brought a lot of imbalance in our fertilizer application, and PK ratio is very, very alarming. So it is important for soil health, it is important for environment health, it is important for climate also. So that is important. Second thing, energy consumption for entire operations. I mean, we have to find out more renewable energy source, more green renewable energy source. It's not about electric cars only. It's about electric tractors, fitting to the size, equipments, harvesting, transportation, and the second thing, farm waste management. It is important. So if, for example, we see every year crop residue burning, it is small today, but yes, I mean, India is sitting on, I will say, a gold. We have huge availability of crop residue. I mean, that can be converted into biofuels, and government is coming up a very, very, encouraging biofuel policy now. But technology have to walk in here. So, and the second thing, a generic problem. Well, it's a global problem. We waste around 1/3 of the food which we grow, and India, have to go a long way on how our post-harvest management, and we have to really create the new age and next level of post-harvest management infrastructure just in the middle of our production belts, so that you avoid unnecessary transportation, you avoid unnecessary handling. That also contributes for greenhouse emissions. You use more fossil fuel, and that has its own set of problems. And then yes, climate resilience is important. It will come from both. You have to breed varieties, those who need less water, and you have to work on rice varieties, those probably can have less methane emission. And the same way you have to work on cow and buffalo breedings, where you can do something about the less emission and intrinsic emission which we are talking about. So these are the areas where we really need to work. And the most important, which I feel, taking all this to our farmers, and for that case, it's a global issue. Fact now, 1 in 4 person is a farmer, and globally more than 75% of the farmers are smallholders, less than 2 hectares. So reaching out to all these people with this proposition, which will ask them maybe to compromise on their yields, or by the time market matrices are realigned for the new generation crops. For example, we are focusing a lot on millets and others. So that that lag from they might witness a drop in their incomes in terms of yield. That shift really need to be navigated with a lot of strategy and a proper planning.
Excellent, sir. Actually, great insights on how to ensure that India become, at least in agriculture, net zero, right? So, sir, this brings us because I love, sir, hearing the great insights you are giving. Unfortunately, because of restriction of time, right, I have to curtail the discussion. Otherwise, it's always pleasure to hear you. And maybe
another important point, Deepak, here is most of the globally, if you look at it in India also, people are relying a lot on ruminant animal proteins, which we really need to cut 3x. And we have to basically, work a lot on, plant origin protein source or meats. That is important in addition to food waste.
So there is a lesson for everyone who is listening here. Please move to plant-based protein. It is very healthy for you, but it is at the same time very healthy for the earth we live on. So, sir, this brings me to our
Obviously, one more thing before we move forward. We are already having enough of awareness. Gandhinagar is the highest, forest density, green cover city in world. Man-made. So the same thing, awareness we have to take forward for our increasing our forest covers. They are very important. Soil and forest, they will conserve. They are the sink for, carbon. That will make us neutral, what we are looking for. So afforestation, to deal with deforestation. And I see we really need to have technologies which will be basically developed for integrated forest management. And we really need to have some kind of a, real-time and authentic data about our forests, their health and their increment.
Totally agree, sir. So because I am from Gujarat and have opportunity of working with someone who has been visionary enough to understand that, Mr. Modi, when he was Chief Minister here, and definitely we take pride that Gandhinagar is one of the greenest city in India, and one of the reason for all of us to look at Gandhinagar, come to Gandhinagar and see to it that our cities also become as green as Gandhinagar.
You will feel 2 degree, minimum 2 degree temperature difference the moment you come in the vicinity of Gandhinagar. 4-5 kilometers before that, you can feel that.
So, I agree, sir.
It's an example, it is possible. That gives a belief. If you are sensitive enough, anything is possible in India.
Totally agree, sir. So this brings me to our last question. I would like to understand, how do you see ENAM helping the decarbonization effort? Because you talked about efficiencies in the supply chain, and where I believe like this is the world's biggest experiment, which has so far been very successful. Some success story about that, sir.
When I'm talking to you about this important topic, this takes me to the year 2012 when we did India's first Mandi ERP in Punjab, and then India's first Mandi integration in Tamil Nadu, and finally in 2014 after when we took this proposal to government and it was talked about basically, and we got the project. So every second person was telling me, because we are a generic, I'm coming from an agriculture background, and everybody was basically telling us, how it would happen in India. Farmers don't have smartphones. They don't know, how to use a phone. They don't know how to use computer. And in any case, they have how you will integrate all this. And even if you do all this with the government's will and everything, how you will get it adopted. So, I was always very curious, if farmer can understand a very, very complex, agrochemical name, imidacloprid or monocrotophos or phenolrate or companies like Mactation, Magan, Bayer. So what is there for them, it's a left-hand job to understand, they are Jugaad, Indian Jugaad means their creative capabilities in terms of mechanization are unparalleled. You see in Punjab, in Rajkot, everywhere in India, they produce very well-fitting machineries. Every village has one innovator of agriculture machinery. So I said, I know our farmers are highly adaptive. The moment they find some value, if we succeed in giving them some value, definitely they will adopt it. So I just want to tell you, the biggest challenge was to convince first internal stakeholders, then the stakeholders inside the policy framework, and then the states. Agriculture is a state subject in India, and you have to bring minimum 3 regulatory changes in the framework of each state. Without that, you are not authorized to implement any kind of electronic trading platform. So you will not believe, we did a very, very intense worldwide tour to all the states, and repeatedly 22 days we were traveling every month, and we convinced everyone, and we got such a fantastic support from right from the top till what I mean, all 19 states, they changed their regulation in less than 6 months. Correct. In India, to bring, to make it happen, it takes minimum, 3-4 sessions of their, legislative, and it's a tedious process if you really want to change. That was the first. And then adoption, I want to tell you, we conduct around 6,000 trainings per year. So we have 6,000 trainings per year in these 1,000 markets, and within 5 years, that means we did 30,000 trainings. This is from we as a strategic partner, but more than 20,000 programs, trainings, awareness have been conducted by central government and all these state governments. Today, ENAM, now we are adding another 260 markets. After that, we will have presence in the places like Tripura, Nagaland, Goa. The total number of states will be 22 and union territories will be 3. So this tells us anything is possible in India. Now ENAM 2, we have got the project for another 5 years. We completed first 5 years with a conversion of 20%. Our target was 10%. We closed the first project with a conversion of physical to digital trade, a conversion of 21%. This year, this is the first year of second project, we have already crossed 25. In fact, it is 28. And we are aiming to convert minimum 50% before we close the project in 2026. And 190 commodities are trading right now. Last week only we crossed $30 billion GTV, gross GTV. And I mean, everything is looking good, but yes, you have asked, there are things which we really need to go a long way. For example, we have to enable transactions, and we are very good in settling transactions. After handling this kind of a turnover, hardly we have witnessed 14 transactions where there was a mismatch. So we have to work on transaction enablement. That means financing part of it, and delivery enablement and delivery settlements. These are the 2 areas where our team is focusing more now. And the second thing, we want to build an inclusive system now. So India has witnessed a lot of traction in terms of AgTech after 2014, after ENAM, I would say. So a lot of traction, because people like you, AgriWatch, everyone have contributed a lot for this traction. So now the next ENAM version will be platform of platforms. I mean, we want all the service providers. We want all whosoever, there will be commodity specific platforms across country. So we just want them to plug here and play. So that, if I'm working for a specific commodity or I am working in a specific geography, I should have access to data, access to price discovery, access to deliveries. So we look forward for better inclusive system, and this is first of its kind, architecture. Yeah, I mean, like many of us are there in our account, this is also going to be one of its kind where, you can see minimum 40 types of, the various platforms operating here soon.
Excellent, sir. Great initiative. And yeah.
So about this issue, which is very important. So ENAM, see, we want to basically, we are aiming to make it super inclusive. Data for us, it's a government project, it's a public property. Once the protocols and security, everything is at place, it should be used for basically compressing that time lag, which we feel is challenge. So in Indian agriculture need a very fast and compressed change in terms of infrastructure. Government is trying hard. They have made a fund. So if we really want to change things within 5-6 years, so we really need to be a very, very participating and inclusive, ecosystem. Going forward, we can always make a module where we say these are the, climate friendly production, and we can facilitate trading for how to incentivize, how to basically people adopt it. So you have to basically make space for all these kind of initiatives end to end, starting from agronomic practice to trade and then value. So I feel definitely we are ready for it, be it carbon trading tomorrow. Trading is trading. And once you create a marketplace, it's very easy. When you know the stakeholders.
No, I totally agree with you, sir. And this is, I believe, like, INA, I always say, is the first blood when it comes to digitization of Indian agriculture. And I believe going forward, definitely it will help decarbonizing the complete agri-food value chain. With that, we come to the end of this session. It was pleasure talking to you, Dushin ji. Always, like, it's not just my audience. I learn a lot when I interact with you. So it's always like, double advantage
nice
of moderating you, sir. Okay, sir. Pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
Thanks. Annie.
So thank you, everyone. With that, actually, like, it was pleasure hosting this awesome virtual webinar on decarbonizing agri-food supply chains. And I would like to thank all my guests, especially Rajuji, for being here, right? Still here and listening to all the thoughts. Dushenji, Param, Kunal, Regi, Janet, all have been really awesome. And just I would like to address a couple of questions which have been shared with us on LinkedIn as well as on this session itself. That is there a very specific project which has been able to decarbonize? One project I would request everybody to look at would be the Nama project, which has happened in Thailand, where they are work with 100,000 farmers and making rice more environmentally sustainable by using modern technology. So please have a look at that. And it is claimed that between 10 to 30% of GHG emissions have been reduced because of that. Second question is about can we work on village community models for decarbonization? Definitely, as we always believe, long back, Mr. Modi, when he started e-gram project in Gujarat, digitizing every possible village in India, his viewpoint was that from village, India can be rebuilt. And I strongly believe that yes, village communities would work, and some of the initiative of the government and supported by private sector, including what Rajuji talked about, the FPO part of it. But the only thing is that we need to have right incentives so that different stakeholders can work on it and make it successful. Because just coming out with a concept is not going to work. We'll all have to work together to ensure those FPO farmers collective become profitable. And this is where we at AgriWatch, our sister organizations under Indigram umbrella, ISAP, ILF, we are working with startup FPOs. So all of this thing need to work together, and definitely the possibility is there that we can decarbonize the agri-food supply chain, not just in India, across the world, and India can lead the path. With that, I thank all of you. Thanks a lot. Have a great evening.